I want to first tell you that I don't mean to be rude today. I'm going to disappear right out the back after I give the benediction. My oldest daughter had a child 10 weeks early in her absence and still in NICU. She's coming along, but that's awfully early, 10 weeks before. It was at 30 weeks, 10 weeks before, but she's coming along fine, but my daughter's having to make visits twice a day to the hospital. My wife is primary help with the other two children. I really can't afford to get, not that any of you have it, but I'm trying to maintain some distance from it. So I know we're all confused about this disease. But this morning, I wrote down homily, but this turned into a full-fledged sermon. So because it's hard to get an understanding of the Canaanite woman and Jesus' interaction. He called her a dog. A woman has a sick daughter, very sick daughter. She isn't a Jew, and her daughter is not one of those good Jewish daughters. Jesus, the Jewish rabbi, comes from a long lineage of people who don't like Canaanites. Remember when Joshua came into the promised land? Oh, they had problems with Canaanites. But those were the inhabitants of the promised land. There is still bitter animosity between the Jew and the Canaanite, then and even today. The disciples want her to get lost, but she refuses to go away. Lord, make her stop shouting at us. Send this woman away. And the response of Jesus at first blush seems cruel, heartless. I was sent to the lost sheep of Israel. He says to the woman, it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Now, this is what I call an iceberg text. Iceberg, only about 10 or 15% of it is above the water. 85 to 90% is below the water. And if we're not aware of what is below the water, our Titanic interpretations will sink. Let's ponder what's below the waterline in this text. First of all, remember, Jesus is crucified primarily because he goes against the grain of common held theological perspectives. He goes against the thought processes of the Jewish theologians at that time. Remember how Moses came down from Mount Sinai carrying the 2 tablets, the law, 10 of them. And I want to put to you, those 10 were applicable to all people. Well, you think, well, those were the Jews. Stop and think for a moment. 400 years in captivity in Egypt. They may have been slaves there, but I doubt but very few of them had an idea of monotheism, of one God. They were surrounded by many gods and goddesses. They had many theological quirks, if they had theology at all. Or if they had God at all, or gods. Now, the Old Testament in Exodus and in Numbers, and reinforced through Deuteronomy, are telling us how this multifaceted and multi-believing people became monotheistic. So I put to you the 10 Commandments were given to a group of people that we really, at that time, could not call Jews except only by hereditary. Now I'm going to use a technical word here called redaction. Now, what is redaction? Redaction is a piece of literature as it goes through time and is copied, is added to as the beliefs of a group of people change. The book of Leviticus, most scholars believe, is redacted, changed, expounding upon what the 10 Commandments believe, but highly regulated by a strong priestly class. Hundreds and hundreds of years after the death of Moses. What began as 10 laws is now jumped to 613. It's kind of like amendments to our Constitution, isn't it? And this strong priestly class takes their perspective and tightens the 10 to determine who really is a follower of God and who is not a follower of God, who is in, who is out. If we think that Moses brought down 613 laws on stone tablets, he would have had to have an 18-wheeler to get them down to the bottom of Mount Sinai. And thus we see the progression of faith move from a people that had all kinds of belief, and then it moves to a point of only these people, God is only for these people. And then the rules get even more nitpicky, because the religious people began to give commentary on them. The Pharisees come up and chide Jesus. Why don't your disciples wash their hands before they eat? I suspect they wash their hands, but not all the time. And thus, by saying this and bringing this point up, the religious leaders were saying they're not really good Jews. They're not as good as we are. And now the rules have moved from excluding outsiders to excluding many Jews and creating a religious caste system within Judaism where they were elite. And Jesus is in trouble all the time for dismantling this highly biased theological construct. And it has, by the time of Jesus, existed for centuries. Wait a minute. It's not what goes into a mouth that defiles a person. It's what comes out of the mouth. For what comes out of the mouth comes out of the heart. And it's the heart, where the heart is, that defiles us. Not what you eat, that's an outward sign. Not just, it's not about washing the hands. It is the heart that separates us from God. It's the intent in our heart that separates us from God. Well, the disciples tell Jesus, you know, those Pharisees don't like what you're saying. You think? You think they don't like it? Certainly they don't like it. The elite don't like that heart stuff. You can't simply just check off the heart and say, I did that. The elite don't like the ulterior motive stuff. If we get down to that, it might indict the elite. When one appears to the heart and not to the outward signs of religion, that might include people who don't wear the name Jew. It might open the door to inclusivity. It might allow people into the sheepfold that aren't the true sheep of Israel. Now, when Jesus says his disciples are scratching their head, well, what in the world is he talking about? Just like you're thinking, what does this have to do with this Canaanite woman? You have to understand what's at stake. This is the 90% under the water. Now we'll deal with it. You ever had an experience where you haven't thought about or seen a person for years? And then suddenly one day it strikes you in the mind, God, I haven't thought about them in so long. And all of a sudden you're at the AHPC or Walgreens with your mask on, and you see them. had this experience a few weeks ago. I was trying to call someone that came across my mind. I was on line 1. Karen came in and said, so-and-so on line 2. It was the one I was trying to call. Those are serendipitous. And this happens after Jesus talked about these things. Enter the Canaanite woman. She's not a Jew. She's not acceptable. But her daughter is sick. And the woman is desperate. Now, one of the worst things a Jew could call another person was a dog. Now, I'm not talking about calling them a golden retriever, a Shih Tzu, a Highland Terrier. The dogs in those days roamed the streets. They were the street vultures. They served their purpose to clean up any trash that was around. They were mangy, probably disease-ridden, and Jesus called her a dog. It's not right to take the children's food and throw it to the dog. I was sent to the lost sheep of Israel. Jesus is giving voice to the lesson he had just taught. He is saying the things that the Pharisees and the disciples had thought about those outside. He is using this moment as an expression of the motives of their heart, what was in their heart. Now here's a case in point of what I was talking about, because the disciples expressed they don't understand. This woman throws herself into the dust at Jesus' feet and says this great comeback. But even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the master's table. This woman understands the heart of God. She understands better than 613 laws that God is merciful. She understands better than the scribes and the Pharisees, and better than the disciples. This woman, we could say, by this one sentence, is prophetic. She expresses the original purpose of all revelation. That God is for all people. Earth, heaven, quaking revelation. She is expressing the faith that Abraham had before anything was written down. When all Abraham had was his heart and his relationship to God. And she had it. God speaks to her heart. And Jesus says this. Woman, great is your faith. She didn't know squat about 613 rules. But she just knew that within this man, her daughter could be healed. In conclusion, I say to you, as you look around at the people sitting in the pew, those of you at home watching this, when you see a person, you only really see about 10%. For 90% is below what you can see, below the water. We don't know the real heart of other people. We don't know what drives them. And that's why Jesus says, judge not, lest you be not judged. He's not saying you can't tell what is right and wrong, but you can't judge the heart of an individual. That's God's job. And finally, it may well be that this love that this woman has for her daughter that will move her to lying in the dust, throwing all pride aside. She may be an example of God's love to us and how far God will go, for we are sons and daughters of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
If ye then be risen with Christ,
reminder, as much as you're going to want to shake somebody's hand, hug them, please don't do it. And keep your distance. Wash your hands. Stay safe. And may the Lord bless you, keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord lift up his countenance to you and continue to be gracious to you this day and forever. Amen.